Hello, I'm Tam Renee Ruiz. I am the founder of Adelante Spanish for All, which is a division of Impact Bilingual Services. And what we do is advocate for learning language and preserving heritage languages in the home. And I'm also a conference speaker, an author of several books, including general language learning supplements, as well as an Amazon best-selling book, African American Homeschooling Mompreneurs. I also create curriculum, different courses that you can do self-paced as well as teach live online classes. Now, as far as our family's journey, we've actually done both. We've maintained a heritage language as well as learned new languages, and it wasn't always easy. The beginning, when we started out, I wouldn't say, in my view, it was entirely successful, but we've learned a lot along the way, and it can certainly be a help to you as you travel on your language path. Now, a little bit about me. I was actually raised monolingual. English is my first language. Having grown up as a military brat, I came to love and appreciate other languages and cultures. When my dad was stationed in Germany, I was learning German informally while I was also taking Spanish classes. Yeah, I thought it was a little weird then too, but be that as it may. As an adult, I took college Spanish, 2 semesters, in fact. And a year afterward, I met my Spanish speaking husband. Now, I'd like to mention that while I was taking college Spanish, I had both Taiwanese friends on the side, I had Japanese friends, and they're trying to teach me Mandarin and Japanese. I was pretty scared of tones at the time, so I actually focused more on the Japanese and kind of dropped the Mandarin. But both of those languages played a part in my life later on. Now, when I had met my husband, I had essentially 2 total years of Spanish classes, um, which meant I practically understood nothing, right? How many of you have taken a foreign language class in high school or in college that was grammar based? It's in a textbook and you learn list of vocabulary and things like that. You walk out not really knowing a whole lot. You can't really converse. You don't really understand a whole lot. Well, that was me. And you know that universal smile and nod looks like this. Yeah, that usually means a person doesn't understand what you're saying, actually, so they're just smiling and nodding. Well, when my husband asked me to be his girlfriend, I was still smiling and nodding. Yes, we are married today. So we raised our daughter, our oldest daughter, at the time. We raised her bilingual in English and Spanish. That was a goal of ours. And at the same time, I became a Spanish student as an adult because my Spanish wasn't all that great at the time. I introduced both German and Japanese to her. Eventually, I dropped the German and I just did as much as I could with the Japanese. Now, when our second daughter came along 11 years later, we continued in English and Spanish, but her language to be learned turned out to be Chinese, which we continue to do today. Now, what was the purpose of doing this? Why was it important for us that our children learn the heritage language or my husband's native language and at least one more language? That is the question I want to pose to you, as well as guide you through goal setting for language learning. Um, this is an expansion of one of the books that I wrote, which is The 28 Days to Family Language Learning, which is also the title of this webinar. Um, but I would like to get a little bit deeper as far as the goal making and give an overview of the planning process. Now, this step is important because, after all, what's the whole point of making language such a priority that you want to integrate it into your daily life? Without knowing your why or your motivations and setting a goal, it will be very easy to put language learning on the back burner anytime an obstacle pops up. And really, let's think about it. How often does that happen? Some of us might have a native language we want to pass on, and we start out, but then things get a little hard or we don't have that support, and it's really easy to stop because everyone around us, everyone else, is speaking a majority language. So having a motivation and knowing what these are and having a goal is really important to kind of set that foundation, and this is what's going to help you continue. So first we're going to take a look at motivations and nailing down those goals. Then we'll do an overview of how to plan to integrate within the daily routine. Now, this presentation is a small part of the complete course on how to create viable language learning routines in the home. And again, it's based on the book. Now, all of us do have different motivations for learning language. It may be a native language for you or your partner. It may be a heritage language that is in the extended family. It could be a language that um, you're learning in your current country. It could be a language of a country you want to eventually visit, or even just a language you or your children just happen to take an interest in. For example, a neighbor that speaks a different language moved into your neighborhood, um, and you found that, oh, I want to learn this particular language. Maybe your child is attending immersion school, and you find that you're interested maybe because you want to help your child learn the language and have more practice opportunities, or just because you find it interesting. You may have taken a foreign language in school and decide you want to pass that language on to your children, which is kind of how I did with the German and the Japanese, even though both of those were informally. Now, everyone has different motivations, but the outcome is the same. There's a language, or more than one language, that you want your children to have the benefit of learning. And whatever your motivation is, it is valid. I don't believe there's too weak a reason for wanting to encourage a language legacy with your children. If anything, there are disadvantages to growing up monolingual. So kudos for you for breaking that monolingual mold. It's estimated that over 50% of the world's population speak two or more languages. So you're in good company. So I want you to write down all your motivations for wanting to learn language with your children. Um, you can use the worksheet provided to help you determine and record these particular motivations. Because believe me, there will be days that you will not be motivated. You are just not feeling on the level on this day. You may be too tired. There may be too many attitudes that day, including your own. Okay? So, those are the days you will want to look at your written list of motivations and remotivate yourself. And also, let's look at what your overall goals for family language learning. Now, these are the long term outcomes you want to see in learning a language. Later, we'll talk about actionable goals because these particular goals aren't specific actions that help you get to that point. But this is what you envision seeing in the future by learning a different language. One of a goal, for example, could be you want to communicate or you want your children to be able to communicate with extended family. You may live in a country in which that language is a minority language, but there are family members, grandparents, aunts, cousins, whoever, and your children will need to be able to communicate with them. Um, you may want to, or you may want your child to be able to study in another country, and depending on the program, many of these programs require having a certain level of language in order to study, because they'll probably be in the local school taking classes in that particular language. So that will be important. Um, for some, you just want to check a box on the high school graduation list. So you decide, well, we need to learn this language, and it's motivating for you to help your child if you're learning alongside them. Some may want to take mission trips to countries in the target language, so you have to learn the language so you can take these trips and talk to the people in their native languages. Another goal could possibly be fluency. Um, or if you're starting with your kids really little, even being bilingual is a goal. You want them to be able to, at any age, speak, read, and write in the target language. These are all particular goals that you envision, seeing how you and or your child is using this language that you want them to learn. So whatever these overall outcomes you desire to see, write them down. Write them down. Did you know that when you write your goals down, they're more likely to happen? Yeah, so write them down. Just like your motivations, on those days when you're just not feeling it, these written goals can be read and help keep you on that language learning path. And again, you can use the worksheet provided to help you come up with some goals and record them. I do have some sample goals on the worksheet. You can adapt those to your family, to your own needs and wants, as well as add your own. Okay, so take your time with this part. Take your time. Know that motivations and goals can change. That's totally okay. As your family grows and changes, your motivations and goals can also change. So the motivations and goals worksheet, it's not a static, stay the same document. I mean, once you write it down, just that's just gold and you can't change it at all. It's not like that. It's a record of your current thoughts. This is what you're thinking right now. Now, as your needs and wants change, your motivations and goals become dynamic. It's changing, it's growing, it's evolving. That's the type of document that this is. What's important is that you record these changes, and you're also going to see a record of your own growth and the growth of your children as you go back and see how these motivations and how these goals have changed through time. When you finish with that one part, I want you to put your motivations and goals in a statement. And you're going to hang this up in a place where you can see it. Not just you, but everyone that's involved in this project. It's important that the family knows the why and the what of the language learning. In fact, after you've hashed it out in your own brain, get your family's thoughts on it. Okay? Get their thoughts on it. Um, some people are gung ho, yeah, let's do this. Especially if it was your child's idea to begin with, and they're gonna want to just really learn everything that they can, and you're gonna find out some of their ideas, why they want to learn and what they want to do with that particular learning. Also, don't be discouraged if they're not as enthused as you are about the endeavor. It sometimes happens that way as well. But it will be good to know what their thoughts about it are because you can use those in planning for that next step. Now, that next step is the planning. Now, what are you planning for? Well, often without planning, we just jump in and start, and as soon as an obstacle or attitude pops up, it's just easy to stop. Okay, now I usually tell families just start where you are. If it's just one word, just incorporate that word all the time. And that's good because it kind of starts a little bit of a habit. However, you really need to move from that because there's really not a whole lot of growth in that. Okay. Um, I say to start because it's very easy to postpone and just continue to wait. And so I say start. But we also need to consider putting together a plan. Without planning, many times language learning doesn't happen consistently. And consistency is a very important component of success in language. So, for example, my youngest daughter, was learning Chinese. She was taking, it was like a 25-minute Chinese class every week. That's not a whole lot. 25 minutes out of 100 or so many hours a week really isn't a whole lot. But I knew by this time we needed to be able to use the language or she was just going to forget everything. And at the time, all I could remember was left and right in Chinese. Left and right, left and right. So anytime um, the opportunity came up where I needed to use left and right, I would say it in Mandarin. Now, most of the time I used it was in the grocery store because she liked to push that buggy. And so I would tell her which way to go, left, right. But I would only say it in Mandarin. And she would go, well, which way is, zua? And I'll go, oh, it's like, I'll use my hands this way. Which way is this? And like I said, it was just in the grocery store. It was consistent for that particular routine, but that's not the type of consistency that I'm talking about. There wasn't really a whole lot of growth there because all she was getting was left and right. I will tell you this, she did learn left and right in Mandarin before she figured out which was left and right in either English or in Spanish. Now, tell me how that happens, right? But it wasn't enough consistency to allow for growth from going from left to right to anything else. So I really needed to put together a plan. So the planning is really essential for growth. If we do not plan where we start, then check the progress in different areas, such as in speaking and listening, comprehension, reading, etc., then we kind of lose track of where we are in the journey and we don't know that next step. So let's plan this out. So, what are you going to plan? We're going to plan your resources. We're going to look at what you already have, what you might need. You're going to plan your support. You're going to plan routines. All of these are part of the plan. I'm going to give a short overview on the routine part of the plan. Okay, so why routine? A routine is something that is done consistently. Hopefully, a daily routine that's optimal, as there will be more opportunities for exposure to the target language. There's many routines you can choose from. I often suggest to families to start with mealtime. Why? Because everybody eats, right? Okay. But there's a lot of other routines. There's your morning routine, there's maybe a chore routine, there's your bathroom routine. Um, there's all different types of routine, but I like to tell people to start with mealtime. It's usually the easiest one to begin with. Now, note when I say mealtime, I say a mealtime. A mealtime. Not all the meal times. Not breakfast and lunch and snack and dinner. No, start small. Then it's more likely to get done. It's not as overwhelming. You're thinking, oh my goodness, I have to use this all day long. No, we're going to start small. Now, if you take the routine and you break it down even further, you can work consistently on one small portion of language every day. Now, when you first start out, it won't even last long in the beginning, but the language will be learned. It'll be learned well and more likely to be used because there isn't too much being introduced all at once. It doesn't become overwhelming to either you or to the children. So, let me show you a sample routine. So, for example, I said I like to start with mealtime. Okay, now this does come from my book, 28 Days to Family Language Learning. And this is starting with mealtime. I want you to take a look at this. At mealtime, there's actually 4 different areas that we can start in. There's 4. You're only going to start with one. So, for example, I have preparation for a meal. That's one portion of mealtime that you could possibly start in. Some of the things I wrote down were I'm hungry. What time is dinner? Um, what's for breakfast? May I have a snack? What would you like for a snack? These are different things that are for preparation. When I say preparation, I wasn't talking about cooking, but actually, cooking is another part of mealtime that you could possibly choose. I also have setting the table. This is another part. Please help me set the table. Can you set the table, please? We need 4 plates. Think about how you were teaching your toddler how to count. And you would say, okay, how many people are in the family? How many plates do we need? Okay, let's count out 4 plates. One, two, three, four. Imagine doing that in your target language. Okay, so instead of saying it in the language you're using now, your majority language, it could be English. Um, Imagine doing it in Spanish. You know, ¿cuántos platos? You hold up a plate. How many plates do we need? Oh, we need 4. Cuatro. Now, right now, I'm translating because I don't know if the audience here speaks Spanish. But when you're doing the routine, you're not actually translating anything. You're showing it with what you have in your hand. These are your props. You know, how many cups do you need? One, two, three. But you would do it in your target language. Okay. Another portion of mealtime at the table. This is an opportunity for food and drink vocabulary. Please pass the milk. Yeah, in your target language, but you're just going to say it that way. I also like to teach my families in my family time Spanish classes. I also teach them to compliment the chef. So I have this food is delicious. You know, thank you for the meal. Compliment the chef. These parts of language are also important, not just the parts where we're trying to get a point across, but be nice, okay? And then we have another portion of mealtime, cleanup time. Please scrape your plate, you know, the trash, the compost, the garbage disposal, however you do your mealtime. Place your dishes in the sink or place your dishes in the dishwasher. Help wipe off the table. Okay. And can I help you clean up? That's a good one to teach your kids. So as you see, there's many different areas that you can start with mealtime, but just start with that one area. That way it is not overwhelming and you will learn the language for that particular portion of the routine very well. Y'all will become fluent in that portion and then you can add on something else. So that's part one of your routine is start small. You're going to figure out the language, the routine that you want to start with. Okay? Think of what you already know, think of what you're already doing consistently. It's much, much better if your child already knows the routine. If they know, like the back of their hand, that we do this, we do this, we do this, then you can switch it to your target language. Okay? But like I said, you can just choose one portion of that routine and start there. Think of the language you already know for that routine and write that down. So for mealtime, if you know how to say, can I have, uh, milk, and maybe you have a lot of vocabulary for food, you can write down in the target language, can I have? And then write down the vocabulary that you already know. Or please pass this. Or let's say it's a morning routine, brush your teeth, you might know. Wash your face, put on your socks. Whatever the language you already know, they could be full sentences, they could be phrases, they might just be individual words. Okay, that's okay. Write it down. You need to know what you know. You might know more than you thought you did. Remember, it is okay to mix the language if you don't have all the words yet. So, for example, if you're sitting at the table or you've written down leche for milk and you say, please pass the leche, that's what you know. You're starting off small. Okay, all you know is leche, so you're saying, please pass the leche. Now you know that you need to learn how to say, please pass the. Okay? Um, know that the more you speak and practice, the more language you will find that you need. When I started routines with my youngest daughter, we decided to do Mandarin morning, and it was only breakfast time, and realized that we knew how to say um, I like and I don't like. But the only foods that we knew how to say were bread, noodles, milk, and sandwich. Okay, so you can imagine when we started that day, there was very little we could actually say. You know, do you like? We would say in Mandarin, and then say cereal in English or in Spanish because sometimes some words we're used to saying in Spanish, and so it would come out in half in Spanish and half in Mandarin. It's pretty crazy, but you have to start somewhere, right? And so as you're in there, you can just write down, okay, we realize we don't know how to say this part. Write it down. That's something you can look up later, but not on Google Translate, please. That's not a good resource. Okay, so again, the more you speak and practice, the more language you will find you are going to need. But this is how you progress and grow. It's a really fun part. And so plan for it, plan for growth. I want you to plan for reactions. Does that sound a little strange? Okay, plan for reactions. I want you to write down, my kids are so gung ho and they're positive about it. You know, I mean, you don't even have to really plan for this because you're just gonna be so happy. You're gonna give smiles. You're gonna give encouragement. High fives and good jobs and that was great. In the target language, that was great. Um, but also plan for reactions such as maybe your child's willing, but they're kind of unsure about this whole thing. Well, if you ask a question and you've used your props and you've kind of gestured and they understand and they might, let's say they answer back in English or whatever the majority language is, they answer back in English, just plan to give the language that the child needs. Okay, that's your plan. I'm going to give them the words as though they are speaking so that when they imitate what you're saying, they're speaking of themselves. For example, wanting something. If you give them the language, you're not going to say, you want water. You'll say, I want water. So that way, when they repeat, they'll say, I want water. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Plan for negative reactions. You plan not to be angry. We want this to be a fun process, and we don't want to turn off, you know, um, the positive feelings about learning language. If they're already negative, you're going to plan to remain positive yourself and plan to give the language that the child needs. Because a lot of times that negativity comes from the child either not understanding or not knowing how to respond. And that's frustrating. Think of your toddlers before they could speak, how much frustration there was because they were unable to communicate. It's the same thing, especially if your children are older, 5 or 6 years old, they can become really frustrated because they've been able to communicate all this time. And now all of a sudden, it's like they're being transferred back into toddlerhood where I don't know how to speak, I don't know how to communicate. So if your kids are 5 years on up, it can be pretty frustrating, and you can get some kickback on this, some negative feedback. So plan on you remaining positive and giving them the language. They may or they may not repeat back. It's okay. They're listening to the language. They're going to get it. I want you to plan for obstacles. Plan for obstacles. Determine what are potential known obstacles and how you will deal with them. Many times our good intentions are upended because we're caught off guard. Now, this step does not mean you try to think of every little possible negative thing that can happen in daily life. You will never start your routine if you try to do that. Okay, let's not do that. However, for example, if you know that one of the children may be negative toward this whole venture, think of how you're going to deal with the negative attitude. Okay, that's part of the plan. That's part of planning for the reaction. But it's an obstacle. How are you going to deal with that? Let's say you work a lot, or you have a newborn waking every 2 hours, whatever. Think of how you're going to deal with those times. You're too tired to even want to start to follow through with anything. Okay? Sometimes we wake up and we're just too tired. What can you do so that you will still follow through with the plan? But at the most, I want you to only think of only three obstacles. I don't want you to try to think of every possible thing and have a list of 10 different ways you're going to deal with things. Think of only three. Okay? Just three. If you can't think of three, that's even better. Three things. Why? Because many obstacles can be dealt with the same way. And once you've been dealt a hand or two, you often can handle any unplanned obstacle. So it's not something to dwell on. So, again, this is just a short overview of the goals and planning to get you started on your language learning journey. Now, the upfront work can really help you to not only start, but keep you going consistently. All right? So, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm on Facebook at Adelante Spanish for All. I go on live to answer questions. I like to provide information about family language learning, as well as information on the Spanish classes that I teach. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Again, get in contact with me if you have any questions or comments. And good luck on your language learning journey.